I was so excited for our family vacation. I packed my bag days before we left because I thought this trip would bring us closer together. Even though my family often ignored me, I still hoped things would be different this time. During the long drive, everyone laughed, talked, and shared snacks, but I was mostly left out of every conversation. I tried to smile and enjoy the trip anyway because I did not want to ruin the mood. After several hours, we stopped at a gas station so everyone could use the restroom and buy drinks. I went inside to grab a bottle of water and a small snack. I was only gone for a few minutes. When I came back outside, I looked around for our car, but it was nowhere to be seen. At first, I thought they had moved to another parking spot. I walked around the station looking for them, but my heart started beating faster when I realized they were really gone. I quickly pulled out my phone and called my mom. She answered after a few rings. Before I could even ask what had happened, she laughed and said, "We thought you'd find a way home." Then she hung up. I stood there in complete shock, unable to believe my own family had left me behind on purpose. I called my brother next, hoping he would tell me it was all a joke. Instead, he laughed too and said they were already far down the highway and that I should figure it out because I was an adult. My hands were shaking. I felt embarrassed, hurt, and completely alone. People around me noticed the look on my face, but I was too ashamed to explain what had happened. As I sat on a bench outside the gas station, I kept thinking about all the times my family had treated me like I did not matter. They always expected me to forgive them, but this time felt different. They had left me in a strange place without caring how I would get home, or if I was even safe. I checked my wallet and realized I had only a small amount of cash with me. My phone battery was also getting low. For the first time, I understood that I could not keep making excuses for the way they treated me. They did not see me as someone they loved or respected. To them, I was simply the person they believed would always manage somehow. Sitting there alone, watching cars come and go, I made a quiet promise to myself. If I found a way home, my life would never be the same again. I was done letting people treat me as if I had no value, even if those people were my own family. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. Panicking would not help me. I walked back inside the gas station and asked the cashier if there was a place where I could charge my phone for a few minutes. The kind woman behind the counter looked at my face and could tell something was wrong. She pointed me to a small charging station near the coffee machines. While my phone charged, she gently asked if everything was okay. At first, I wanted to say I was fine, but the words would not come out. I quietly told her that my family had driven away and left me there. Her eyes became wide with surprise. She shook her head and said she could not imagine anyone doing that to their own family member. She gave me a free cup of coffee and told me to sit down until I figured out my next step. Her kindness almost made me cry because it was more care than I had received from my own family that day. I opened my phone and checked for buses, trains, and ride-sharing services. Everything was expensive because we were far from the city. I called a few friends, but most of them were working or living too far away to help. I felt completely stuck. A few minutes later, an older man who had been sitting nearby walked over. He had overheard part of my conversation with the cashier. He politely asked if I was safe and if I needed help. Normally, I would never accept help from a stranger, but something about him made me feel comfortable. He told me he was driving toward the same city where I lived. He even showed me his driver's license and explained that he often traveled this route for work. The cashier quietly nodded and said she had seen him there many times before. That made me feel a little more relaxed. After thinking carefully, I accepted his offer for a ride. During the drive, we talked about life. I told him how my family had always treated me like I did not matter. They often laughed at my dreams, ignored my feelings, and expected me to solve every problem on my own. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said something I would never forget. He looked at me and said, "The people who are supposed to love you the most do not always deserve unlimited chances. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop chasing people who keep proving they do not care." His words stayed in my mind the entire trip home. For years, I had blamed myself for every problem in my family. I always believed that if I tried harder, they would finally accept me. But after what happened at the gas station, I finally saw the truth. Nothing I did would ever be enough for people who had already decided not to value me. When the car stopped outside my apartment, I thanked the man many times for helping me. Before leaving, he smiled and said, "One bad family does not mean the whole world is bad." Never forget that. As I watched him drive away, I knew this day had changed something inside me forever. I had made it home safely, but I also realized that the next decision I made would completely change the future of my relationship with my family. When I walked into my apartment, everything was quiet. I locked the door behind me and sat on the couch without turning on the lights. My phone was full of messages from my family, but none of them said they were sorry. Instead, they were sending funny pictures from the vacation. They smiled in every photo as if nothing had happened. One message from my brother said, "See? You made it home. We knew you'd figure it out." Another one read, "Stop being so dramatic. It was just a joke." I stared at those messages for a long time. That was the moment I understood they did not feel guilty at all. They actually believed what they had done was funny. They never once asked if I was scared, if I had enough money, or if I had reached home safely. It was clear that my feelings meant nothing to them. Instead of replying, I put my phone on the table and spent the rest of the evening thinking about my life. I remembered birthdays they forgot, family dinners where they ignored me, and every time they expected me to help them without ever saying thank you. I had always hoped things would change, but now I realized I was the only one trying. The next morning, I made a decision. I stopped calling them first. I stopped answering every message within seconds. I stopped dropping everything whenever they needed a favor. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. A week later, my family returned from their vacation. My mother called me immediately. I let the phone ring. She called again and again before finally leaving a voicemail. "Why aren't you answering? We need your help this weekend." Not once did she say, "I'm sorry." A few hours later, my brother sent a message asking if I could watch his kids on Saturday because he and his wife wanted to attend a party. Before, I would have canceled my own plans without thinking. This time, I simply replied, "I'm not available." Within minutes, my phone exploded with angry messages. "So now you're acting selfish? Family is supposed to help family. You've changed." I looked at those words and almost laughed. The same people who had abandoned me at a gas station were now calling me selfish because I refused to babysit for one evening. For the first time, I did not argue. I did not explain myself. I did not apologize for setting a boundary. I simply turned off my phone and went out to enjoy my weekend. It felt strange at first, but it also felt peaceful. I realized how much energy I had wasted trying to please people who never appreciated me. As I enjoyed my day, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had no idea that my silence was making my family furious. They were about to show up at my apartment together, demanding answers. They expected me to give in like always. They had no idea that this time, I was finally ready to stand my ground. The next afternoon, someone knocked loudly on my apartment door. The knocking became louder every few seconds until it sounded like they were trying to break the door. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother, my brother, my father, and my sister-in-law standing outside. None of them looked worried. They looked angry. I opened the door just enough to speak. Before I could say anything, my mother crossed her arms and said, "What is wrong with you? Why are you ignoring your family?" I stayed calm and answered, "I am not ignoring anyone. I just decided to stop saying yes to everything." My brother laughed and shook his head. "You're seriously still upset about the gas station? Grow up. It was just a joke." I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "A joke is something everyone laughs at." I was the only one left scared and alone. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my sister-in-law stepped forward. "We needed you to watch the kids today. We already made plans because we thought you would do it." I replied, "You made plans without asking me first. That is not my responsibility." My father's face turned red. "After everything this family has done for you, this is how you repay us?" I took a deep breath. What exactly has this family done for me? You left me at a gas station hours away from home and laughed when I called for help. Not one of you apologized. They all looked at each other, but nobody had an answer. My mother tried to change the subject. "You're making a small mistake into a huge problem." I quietly said no. I stayed silent about hundreds of small problems. The gas station was simply the day I finally stopped pretending everything was okay. The room became completely silent. My brother rolled his eyes. "Fine. If you're going to be this sensitive, don't expect us to ask you for help anymore." I nodded. "That's exactly what I want." His confident smile disappeared. They had expected me to argue, cry, or apologize. Instead, I agreed with him. For the first time, they realized they could no longer control me with guilt. My mother suddenly changed her tone. "We're family. Families forgive each other." I looked at her and calmly replied, "Families also protect each other. They don't leave each other behind." Nobody spoke after that. A few seconds later, they quietly walked back toward their car. As they drove away, I closed the door and leaned against it. My heart was racing, but I also felt something I had not felt in a very long time: freedom. I finally understood that peace does not come from making everyone happy. It comes from respecting yourself enough to stop accepting disrespect. What I did not know is that only 3 days later, my brother would desperately need my help more than ever before. This time, the decision would be completely in my hands. 3 days later, my phone started ringing early in the morning. I looked at the screen and saw my brother's name. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. The moment I picked up, I heard panic in his voice. "Please, I need your help." It was the first time I had ever heard him sound afraid. I calmly asked, "What happened?" He took a deep breath and said, "Our babysitter canceled at the last minute. My wife and I both have important meetings today, and no one else can watch the kids. Mom and Dad are out of town, and every person we called said no." I stayed quiet. After a few seconds, he added, "Can you please help us? Just this once." Only a week earlier, he had laughed while leaving me alone at a gas station and told me to figure things out myself. Now he was. For the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. When people lose control over you, they often try to make you feel guilty instead. But guilt only works if you believe you've done something wrong. And for the first time, I knew I hadn't. I had no idea that later that evening, an unexpected visitor would knock on my door with news that would completely change the way I looked at my family forever. That evening, just as I was making dinner, someone knocked softly on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I was surprised to see my aunt standing there. She was my mother's older sister. We had always been close when I was younger, but over the years we had spoken less because most family gatherings had become uncomfortable. She gave me a warm smile and said, "Can I come in for a few minutes?" I nodded and invited her inside. After sitting down, she looked at me for a moment before speaking. I heard everything that happened. I wasn't sure what she meant, so I asked, "About the gas station?" She slowly nodded. "Your mother called me after you stopped answering her messages. She expected me to convince you to apologize." I almost laughed. "And did she tell you why I stopped talking to them?" My aunt sighed. "She said you were being stubborn and selfish. But that's not the whole story, is it?" For the first time in years, someone in my family actually wanted to hear my side. I told her everything from being left at the gas station to the phone call, the jokes, the lack of apology, and how they only contacted me again when they needed a babysitter. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked disappointed, not in me, but in the rest of the family. Then she said something that shocked me. "You know, this didn't start with the gas station." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She folded her hands and quietly said, "They've been taking advantage of you for years. Everyone in the family could see it." I stared at her in disbelief. "Everyone knew?" She nodded. "We knew you were always the first person they called when they needed money, babysitting, rides, or help. We also noticed that they rarely invited you unless they wanted something." My chest felt heavy. If everyone knew, why didn't anyone say anything? She looked down for a second. "Because people often stay silent to avoid family drama." That was wrong. I should have spoken up much sooner. Her words hurt, but they also gave me answers I had searched for all my life. I had spent years wondering if I was imagining the unfair treatment. I wasn't. Other people had seen it too. Before leaving, my aunt reached into her purse and handed me an old family photo. It showed all of us from many years ago. She pointed at the picture and smiled sadly. "You were the happiest child in this photo." I looked at my younger self, smiling without a single worry. I barely recognized that person anymore. As she stood to leave, she gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting your peace. Sometimes loving yourself is the hardest decision you'll ever make." After she left, I sat alone holding that old photograph. For the first time, I realized I wasn't crazy, ungrateful, or selfish. I had simply been treated unfairly for so long that it had started to feel normal. And as I turned the photo over, I noticed something written on the back in faded ink, a short sentence from my late grandmother that was about to reveal a family secret no one had ever told me. My hands started shaking as I turned the old photo over. The writing was faded, but I could still read it. It said, "Always protect the one with the kindest heart. They will be the easiest to hurt." At the bottom was my grandmother's signature. I stared at those words for a long time. It felt like she was speaking directly to me, even though she had passed away years earlier. I remembered how she used to hug me every time we visited her. She always told me I was special, even when nobody else seemed to notice. At the time, I thought she was simply being a loving grandmother. Now I wondered if she had seen something that I was too young to understand. The next day, I called my aunt. "Why did Grandma write this?" There was silence for a few seconds. Then my aunt quietly replied, "Because she worried about you." I frowned. "Worried about me? Why?" My aunt took a deep breath. "When you were a teenager, your grandmother noticed that everyone expected you to give while asking for almost nothing in return. She told your parents many times that they were putting too much responsibility on you." I was speechless. They knew. "Yes," my aunt answered softly. "Your grandmother warned them that one day you would become exhausted from always being the one who sacrificed." I slowly sat down. So they ignored her? I'm afraid they did. Tears filled my eyes. It hurt knowing that someone had tried to protect me, but nobody had listened. My aunt continued, "Before your grandmother passed away, she told me something. She said, one day, they will push them too far. When that day comes, don't ask them to go back. Help them move forward." I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. For years, I had believed that maybe I was expecting too much from my family. Now I knew the truth. Even my grandmother had seen the pattern long before I did. That evening, I placed the old photo in a small frame and put it on a shelf in my living room. It was more than a picture. It was a reminder that kindness should never be confused with weakness. As I looked at it, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my brother or my mother. It was a message from my father. There were only 5 words. "Can we please talk tomorrow?" I stared at the screen for several minutes. My father had never been the type to ask. He usually stayed quiet while everyone else spoke. The fact that he was reaching out on his own made me wonder if something had finally changed. I didn't know whether he wanted to apologize, make excuses, or ask for another favor. But I knew one thing. If we were going to have this conversation, it would be different from every conversation we had ever had before. This time, I would not stay silent. The next morning, I met my father at a small coffee shop near my apartment. I arrived a few minutes early. Part of me expected him to cancel at the last second, but right on time, he walked through the door. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he seemed much older than I remembered. He sat across from me without saying a word. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked down at his coffee and quietly said, "Thank you for coming." I simply nodded. He took a deep breath. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me." I answered honestly. "I don't know what I want anymore." He slowly nodded as if he understood. Then he surprised me. "I've been thinking about what happened at the gas station every single day." I looked at him but didn't interrupt. He continued. "I should have stopped the car." Those 6 words hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't blaming anyone else. He wasn't making excuses. For the first time in my life, he admitted that he had failed me. "I saw your mother and your brother laughing," he said. I knew it was wrong. I even thought about telling them to turn around, but I stayed quiet. "Why?" I asked. He closed his eyes for a moment. "Because." Keeping the peace became a habit. Every time I disagreed with your mother or your brother, it turned into an argument. After years of avoiding conflict, I stopped speaking up, even when I knew something was wrong. His answer didn't erase the pain, but it finally explained something I had wondered about for years. He hadn't been cruel. He had been weak. "I still got left behind," I quietly said. "I know," he replied, his voice breaking. "And I will regret that for the rest of my life." For the first time, I saw tears in my father's eyes. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the table. It was an old envelope. "I found this while cleaning the house," he said. "It belonged to your grandmother." I carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter with my name on the front. My heart started beating faster. "I never knew this existed," I whispered. "Neither did I," my father replied. She wanted you to have it after she passed away, but somehow it was packed away in a box and forgotten. I carefully held the letter in my hands. Just seeing my grandmother's handwriting made my eyes fill with tears. Before I opened it, my father looked at me and quietly said, "I don't expect you to forgive me today, or even this year. I only wanted you to know that I was wrong." For the first time, I believed he meant it. I slipped the letter back into the envelope. I wanted to read it when I was alone. Something inside me told me that whatever my grandmother had written all those years ago was about to change everything I thought I knew about my family. When I got home, I placed the envelope on my kitchen table and just stared at it. I was nervous to open it. It was the last thing my grandmother had ever written to me, and I wanted to read every word carefully. After taking a deep breath, I slowly unfolded the letter. The first line made me smile through my tears. "My dear child, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you, but my love for you has never left." I wiped my eyes and kept reading. She wrote that she had always admired my kind heart. She said I was the type of person who would help others even when I was tired, hurt, or forgotten. She also wrote that kindness was a beautiful gift, but only if I learned to protect it. Then I reached the part that changed everything. She wrote, "One day, you will realize that some people love what you do for them more than they love you. When that day comes, do not become angry. Simply stop giving your time to people who only remember you when they need something." I sat there in complete silence. It felt as if she had written those words after seeing my future. Every sentence described my life perfectly. She continued, "The people who truly love you will never make you prove your worth. They will never laugh at your pain or leave you to face life alone." I couldn't stop crying. For years, I had begged for love from people who only called when they needed a favor. My grandmother had seen the truth long before I did. At the end of the letter, she left one final message. "Do not spend your life chasing people who keep walking away from you. Spend it with those who gladly walk beside you." I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt understood. That evening, I bought a simple picture frame and placed my grandmother's letter beside our old family photo. Every morning, I would see her words and remind myself that I deserved respect, not just responsibility. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from my father. "I told your mother everything I said today," she cried. "Your brother didn't believe me at first, but after we argued, he finally admitted the gas station was never funny." I read the message twice. For the first time, someone in my family was no longer pretending nothing had happened. A few minutes later, another message appeared. "They all want to meet you this weekend. Not to ask for help, just to apologize." I looked at the screen for a long time. Months ago, I would have rushed to say yes. Now, I understood something important. An apology is meaningful only when it is followed by real change. I wasn't sure if my family had truly changed. But this weekend, I was finally going to find out. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house with mixed emotions. Part of me wanted to believe things could finally change. Another part of me was afraid this meeting would turn into another excuse or another attempt to make me feel guilty. When I parked outside, I noticed something unusual. No one was standing at the door waiting with forced smiles. No one was pretending everything was normal. The house was quiet. I walked inside, and everyone was already sitting in the living room. My mother, father, brother, and sister-in-law all looked nervous. For the first time, nobody was talking over each other. My father stood up first. "I'm glad you came." I nodded and sat down. A long silence filled the room before my mother finally spoke. Her voice was much softer than I had ever heard it. "I owe you an apology." She looked down at her hands. "I've spent days thinking about everything that happened. Your father told me the truth about our conversation, and I realized I kept making excuses instead of admitting I was wrong." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Leaving you at that gas station was cruel. Laughing when you called was even worse. I can't change what I did, but I am deeply sorry." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then my brother spoke. I kept telling myself it was just a joke because admitting the truth made me feel ashamed. The truth is, it wasn't funny. I acted like a bully. Hearing him use that word shocked me. He continued. "I also realized something else. I treated you like a free babysitter instead of a brother. I expected your help but never stopped to ask what you needed." Even my sister-in-law looked embarrassed. She quietly said, "I should have thanked you every single time you watched our kids instead of acting like you owed us." "I'm sorry." The room became silent again. Everyone had apologized, but I remembered my grandmother's letter. Words matter. Actions matter more. I looked around the room and calmly said, "I appreciate your apologies. Hearing these words means more than you know. But trust doesn't return in one afternoon." Everyone nodded. I spent years feeling invisible. One conversation can't erase that. My mother wiped away another tear. "We understand." I continued. "If we're going to be a family again, things have to be different. No more guilt. No more expecting me to fix everyone's problems. No more treating my time like it doesn't matter." My brother immediately nodded. "You're right. I'll only believe that," I replied gently, "if I see it." Nobody argued. Nobody became defensive. For the first time in my life, they simply listened. As I stood to leave, my mother quietly hugged me. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't try to make me promise anything. She simply whispered, "I hope one day we can earn your trust again." As I walked to my car, I realized something important. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is built one honest choice at a time. Whether my family truly changed or not would depend on what they did next, not on what they said that day. And for the first time in years, the future of our family was no longer in their hands alone. It was in mine too.